As we get started today, one of the first things we want to do is go over the workbook assignment for lesson 1. So if you will all take that out at this time and have it in front of you. I have it also up here on the screen so that we can follow along. But I want us to review this together before I ask you to turn it in to me. I want to go over it and make certain that you've understood everything, and if you have any questions. Most of the workbook assignments will be turned in or graded in class at the very beginning of the class. And as we come to those times of handling that situation, please be prepared for that and be ready to exchange your paper, your worksheet with other people, because at times we'll have your neighbors grade your worksheet for you and then return it to you so you can look at it and then turn it in to me. And that way we can go over things in class, make certain we've gone over every single point carefully, and make certain there's no misunderstanding. So as you're going through this, first of all, what is the importance of studying Hebrew? What are some of the answers that you gave on your sheets? Chad, how about you?
Well, I said it was important because it helps us to interpret the Old Testament correctly, because that was the language that God gave us the Old Testament in.
Okay, good. It helps us to interpret the Old Testament correctly. All right. And how about going to Jeff? What did you have down?
Because it's the word God chose to communicate.
All right.
Scripture within helps us interpret the Old Testament. So much of the New Testament alludes or points to the Old Testament. So therefore it's going to help us get a better understanding of the exegete text.
Okay, so expanded that interpretation to include the New Testament as well, since the Old Testament is used so heavily in the New Testament. The New Testament depends upon it. Scott, did you have anything else to add to that?
Let's put that, since it is the word that God gave us in that language, and it is the final authority for any disputes or issues of translation. If we're going to preach it properly, we need to be able to read it and not trust others for their interpretation, but read it ourselves.
Okay, good. So Scott has in there not only the fact that it's the final authority for reference when there's a dispute, but also that it helps us to better prepare for preaching if we clearly understand the text and interact directly with the text. What is the origin of the term Semitic? Gus?
Semitic is derived from Shem, which is the son of Noah.
All right, Shem, the son of Noah. Actually, it's Shemitic, you see, instead of Semitic. What's happened there is the aspirated sheen has been transliterated as just a simple S. And so Semitic is actually standing for Shemitic. So it has to do with any of the descendants of Shem, which means it's not just, if we're talking about anti-Semitism, or if we talk about the study of Semitics, it's not just talking about Jews. You could equally say that to be anti-Arab is anti-Semitic, because many of the Arab peoples are also descendants of Shem. So as we look at some of these things, some of these issues, some of the current usage of the term is very different than what we have in the biblical context and in the Semitic studies biblically when we talk about Semitic. We have 5 main branches of the Semitic languages. Roger, what do you have here for the 5?
Hebrew, Akkadian, Aramaic, Ethiopic, and Arabic.
Okay, good. Thank you. And as you go through those, remember they're back there in your syllabus or in the textbook, and the references he's giving there of the different classes of Semitic languages is on page 15. Page 15. And notice the major branches. The Western is the first major branch, out of which come the Northwest group and the Southwest groups. And then you have the Aramaic groups. So you have Western and Eastern. The Eastern is what Roger gave as Akkadian. The Western is further divided into Northwest, which involves Ugaritic, Hebrew, and Aramaic, and Southwest, which is Ethiopic and Arabic. And then the Northwest group has another subdivision under Aramaic. So technically the 5 should be Western, Eastern or Akkadian, Northwest, Aramaic, and Southwest. Okay, those should be the branches that you would have for those groups. Now, what Roger was giving is the text on page 13 to 14, where we have under 1b the branches of Semitic languages: Hebrew, Akkadian, Aramaic, Ethiopic, and Arabic. And in essence, those, as you look at them, are not really branches in and of themselves. This is one of the revisions we're making on the textbook here. They are major language groups and major languages in the Semitic. But notice that Hebrew is not a separate branch all by itself, because it is tied directly in with Ugaritic, Canaanite, and Phoenician. And so there's going to be a little bit of revision there. I wanted to point that out, that the chart on 15 is the one you really want to follow. I'm not going to be counting any points off for having the group that Roger gave as opposed to having the group that's on the later page. I just want to make certain that you've taken a good look at it and thought through it. But also that you keep in mind that Hebrew, Ugaritic, and the Canaanite Phoenician languages are the most closely allied and related of all of them. And that's important for you to remember for later reference when you get into especially the third semester of Hebrew and then into Hebrew exegesis, and you'll see the significance of that as we go along. Any questions there on that one? Everyone understand that? Yes?
Maybe this is just a suggestion if you're revising it. I was wondering how Aramaic is one of the 5 main branches,
Right.
the subgroup.
Because it has sub-branches. That's the main point there. Those who have sub-branches are the main branches.
So that might not be clear.
Right. And part of it is the fact that Aramaic is so closely tied to the other 3 in that Northwest Semitic branch, and yet it has some great distinctiveness to it. And Semitic scholars have had difficulty deciding where to put Aramaic. They all put it in that same location. We have it there in the chart. But they also have to qualify that by saying that it has some distinct differences from the other 3. So it does create a little bit of confusion. Some refer to those as the southeastern branch or southwestern branch, and try to make a separate one. You see Eblite on there is still unidentified as to where it belongs, and some have suggested it might even result in another branch. I don't know. As you pick up the major Semitic scholars and comparative Semitics, you find this is an ongoing debate, how to divide the languages up. All right, let's go to the next page of your sheets there. You were to write out the alphabet 5 times. How did you feel that you did? Did you improve? Did you see any difference as you look across the page? Did you go down vertically and go Aleph through Tau, and then go to the next column and Aleph through Tau, rather than just going all Alephs across? That will help you with the order of the alphabet. I'll be taking a good look at that as you turn it in. I'll grade these, mark them. I'll take a good look to see how you wrote those letters and make any suggestions or observations that I see that might help. Keep in mind that when you write it out by hand, you're doing something very, very different than what you see in the text in front of you. Because the text in front of you has a very stylized Hebrew font. It is characteristic of that used for printing Hebrew Bibles. That's why we learn it. You must learn to read it, but to write it exactly as you see it is almost an impossibility, unless you take hours and hours of penmanship, calligraphy, and make certain you have all the flourishes and all the tittles in there correctly. So don't worry about trying to make your letters look identical to what you see in the Hebrew Bible or what you see in the textbook. Try to get the smooth line representations that we showed you in class last week, and we'll go over again this week. All right, we'll leave that for further changing. I asked you to memorize the alphabet. How are you doing on it? Okay, lay everything aside. Make certain you're not looking at any list. And let's begin right up here at the front with James, and then let's just zigzag back through and go from, when we get back there to Michael, we're going to go across to Robin, and then Tom, and back up to Kyle. Let's keep going through, and let's go through all the alphabet as rapidly as possible in order. Okay, start.
Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Daleth, Hey, Wow,
Zion.
Hate.
Name?
Yod,
Kaf.
Summit?
Lamed,
Lamed.
Noon.
Ayin.
Uh,
Your last name begins.
oh, hey.
Right, okay. It just happened to be that way, Gus. Okay. Sadi.
Cope. Resh. Tao.
Sin.
Sheen.
Sheen. Tau. All right. We've got to learn to go through it quickly. Let's go through it again. Aleph, Beith, Gimel, Daleth, Hey, Wow, Zion, Cheth, Tate, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samik, Ayin, Pei. Good. I was waiting to see because that's the place everyone gets confused. It's Sadi. Okay? Sadi, Kof, Resh, Sin, Shin, Tau. One of the ways to remember the Tzadi is remember that group of 4 is Sophits. Samik, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi. Everyone the 4. Samik, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi. Again. Samik, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi. Again. Samik, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi. Again. Samik, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi. Okay. And then it goes Kof, Resh, Sin, Shin, Tau. Scott?
I understood the connection of those 4.
Those 4 are the difficult part of this alphabet in learning it. Most students have, that's where the breakdown comes, is in those 4 letters. In remembering their order, I keep getting students that give the order Nun Ayin Samik instead of Nun Samik Ayin. Part of it is that Samik, that S sound, seems out of place after the Nun. Whether you've had a Greek alphabet or English alphabet or whatever, it just causes difficulties. And then things fall apart after that. All right? So just remember in the middle you got Sophits. Okay? Sophits. Samik, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi. All right, let's do it one more time. Aleph, Beith, Gimel, Daleth, Hey, Wow, Zion, Taith, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Resh, Sin, Shin, Tau. I told you. That's where it comes, right, Kelly? All right. Do you remember the alphabet song? All right. Anyone able to begin it? Aleph, Beith, and Gimel, Dalet, and Wow, and Zion, Hath, and Taith, and Yod, and Kaf, and Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samik, Ayin, Pei, and Tzadi, Kof, and Resh, Kin, and Shin, and Tau, Avenu, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Aleph, Beith, and Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and Wow, and Zion, Hath, and Taith, and Yod, and Kaf, and Lamed, Nun, Samik, Ayin, Pei, and Tzadi, Kof, and Resh, and Sin, and Shin, and Tau, Avenu, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. All right, I still get the Burger King song involved in there somehow as I try to sing it. All right, which letters sometimes have a dot that we call a dogish in the bosom? Kelly?
They are the Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Pei, and Tau.
Okay, what's an easy way to remember them? We call them the Bagad Kafath letters. Bagad Kafath. Everyone? Bagad Kafath. Again, Bagad Kafath. And that way you get them all in there. Ba, Beith, G, Gad is Gimel, Dalet. Kafath is Kaf, Pei, Tau. Bagad Kafath. All right. Which letters have a different form when they occur at the end of a word? George?
It's Pei
All right.
and Zion.
Okay, Pei, and not the Zion, but the Tzadi.
Okay, it's Tate.
Okay, Pei, Tzadi, and what else? All right, Michael, can you help him out? Besides pay and sadi, what are the other final forms?
The main,
Maim.
noon,
All right, and one more. Anyone? Kyle?
Samic?
Not Samic. Kaf, all right? Kaf, Maim, Noon, Pei, and Sade all have final forms, and we call them what? Kaf, Sofit, Maim, Sofit, Noon, Sofit, Pei, Sofit, and Sade, Sofit. All right? Which letters, both regular and final, extend either above or below the line of writing? First of all, how many of the final letters extend below or above the line of writing? Not 5, because the Maim doesn't extend below, so we have 4 of them, right? So we have the Kaf, the Noon, the what? Pei, and the Sadi, and then what other letters do we have that extend above or below? Lamed goes above, the only one above, and one more below. Kof. All right? And then the next is to distinguish carefully between the letters which have similar forms, and why don't we read these pairs by name? All right? So why don't we start over here with John and come through Gus and back. And John, take the first line and just read those first 3 there, the letter, the and the letter.
Bait and coat.
Kaf.
Cough.
Okay, Baith and Kaf. Gus? Okay. Go ahead, Cal.
Dalit and resh.
Okay, good, Kenny. And Scott?
Dalit and Kaf final form.
Okay, Kaf Sofit.
Kaf Sofit.
Okay, Daleth and Kaf Sofit. All right,
A and hate.
good.
This is Zion and Wow.
The other way around.
Oh, Wow and Zion.
Wow and Zion. Thanks, James. Okay, Jeff?
Wow and noon Safit.
All right, good.
Maim Sofit and Summit.
Good.
Mem, Sophie, and Tet.
Tape. Put the long A sound in there if you would, John. Okay. Kelly?
Ayin and Sadi.
Okay, good. Tom?
Is it Ayan and Zadi Safit?
Correct. All right, Rod?
Sheen and Seen.
Sheen and Seen. Remember, the Sheen has the point over the right horn. The Seen has the point over the left horn. Now, what about the differences in 1, 2, and following here? And let's come up to Kyle. Kyle, which one did you circle here on number 1 and why? Which letter?
I circled the noon because it doesn't cover the full square script.
Okay, good.
Just on the
Remember,
right side.
okay, remember I said that there's several different answers to this, and so there'll be many other reasons, and I'll look at those as I go through and look at your sheets, but we won't go over them right now. All right, next, Chad.
I selected the Lamed because it's the only one that extends above the line.
Okay, good. And number 3, Franz.
I chose the Tzadeh because it's the Safit form.
All right, good. And let's see, did we have more there? I got to scroll down through here. I think that's it, isn't it? All right. So you can turn those in. Please make certain your name and box number are on them so that we can get them back to you in your mailboxes. Scott?
I have a question from a guy that's been out of school for a long time. Some of these questions, that are fairly basic, basically lifting it right out of the book. Is that appropriate?
That's appropriate. It's not a problem. As we go along, we'll trust that more of that will become more of you. You'll put it more in your own words, etc. But at this point, that's not a problem.
It seemed kind of silly to try to take the answer on Shem and twist it to make it different.
Correct.
It just seemed contrived.
No problem. Yeah. Don't make yourself work hard to restate these things if it's not necessary. You turned in workbook exercise number 1 today, Thursday. You have workbook exercise number 2 that is due. Please look at that in your workbook so we can go over that briefly. Exercise number 2 on the vowels. So there are 5 answers. Please make certain you get all 5 answers. And answer why are they called full letter vowels. And then when we deal with the vowels that you circle here as to the item in each group that does not belong, and explain why. I know that sounds a little bit like Sesame Street, doesn't it? Which of these letters is not like the other, which of these letters does not belong. But that's basically what you have to learn. You have to learn to distinguish here. And let's face it, when you start a new language, you start at basics. You're starting at the dada mama stage, all right? You're starting all over learning how to speak and pronounce and say these words. You're going back to infancy, and we're going to bring you through infancy very quickly and rapidly. Some of you will suffer trauma because it'll pass so quickly. You won't have a chance to even learn how to crawl in Hebrew before you're expected to walk and run. So just get used to that. That's one of the things that happens in language study. But as you circle again, explain the reason why you circle them. Which one doesn't belong there? On the first group, you have to look carefully to see that the first one is a shurik, the second one is a holam wow, the next one is a hirik yod, and then you have a tseri. So as you try to explain how they're different, remember the first one, the shurik, is a U-class vowel. The holam wow is an O-class vowel. The hirik yod is an I-class vowel. The tseri is a E-class vowel. So you have different classes. You can't say, well, these are all one class except for one. This one is visual, isn't it? The vowel that doesn't have a vowel letter with it is the one that's different, the last one, the tseri. It doesn't have a yod, it doesn't have a wow with it. So you're watching for all kinds of things. Watch for the way they're combined visually. Watch for their values. Are they long vowels or short vowels? Are they A-class, O-class, E-class vowels? What are the classes of the vowels? Check all of those factors. Again, there could be more than one possible answer rather than any one right answer. But we're looking for you to think through the distinctions. And as you think through the distinctions, it will help to seal in your minds the values of these vowels. And then in part C, I want you to read this aloud. And it should be something like this. If I can read across that first line from right to left, in fact, I'll increase this a little bit more so it shows up even better. But as we read that across, it's going to sound like this. D, ga, mi, be, da, ke, pu, ko, ra, wa, zu, te, you. All right? Those are the sounds. We're going to learn those today. We're going to learn how those vowels are created. We're going to learn what their values are. And we'll come back again to this and read through it again. But that's the type of thing I want you to do, is get to where you can read these without checking any charts. All right? Now listen to me as I go through that first line again, and it'll begin to give you a little bit of an idea, even ahead of our explanation. Even if you haven't read chapter 2 yet, this should help you a little bit as we talk about it here. D, ga, mi, be, da, ke, pu, ko, ra, wa, zu, te, you. Now notice that one of the things you can start observing right away is that when there's the ah sound, you have the pointing below the letter like a small t, a tiny t. That's the ah vowel, like in father. The name of that vowel is comments. Everyone? Comments. All right? So you see that under the second one, ga. You see it on the fifth one, da. go toward the end and you have ra and wa. And it's one of the key vowels in Hebrew. It occurs perhaps more often than any other vowel except for the pathak, which we'll talk about later. All right? There's long vowels, there's short vowels in the exercises, then long and short vowels. I want you to practice this at home. And then on Thursday, when you come in with your exercises, we will read through these, and I will call on some of you to do some reading of these lines. At least Sharon part of them. Or we'll start and go around. Maybe start like here with Henry and say, okay, Henry, take the first one, Gus the second one, etc. And pronounce as we go around. So today we hope to get that accomplished to where you have something to work with. And then words with one syllable. In point 4, you begin to work with actual Hebrew words. And as you begin to hear them and try to hear the sounds of them, I want you to begin making associations. For example, that first word there in number 4 is door. Everyone? Door. Door means generation. Generation. And there's, for example, the witch of what? Of Endor. Ein Dor, the fountain of door, the fountain of generations is what that name means. I want you to associate biblical place names, biblical personal names with the words you hear from time to time so that you begin to understand the parts of different biblical names, and it helps you to remember or make various associations. You have one generation here. When we go through the door into the future, we have a second generation. All right? Some type of word association will always help you to build vocabulary. The third word there, the aleph with the comets under it, and the beth is av. Everyone? Av. Av is the Hebrew word for father. Father. So when we talk about Avimelech, it's literally my father is king. Melech is king. Avi is my father. Av is father. When we say Abba, that's related. That's Aramaic related to the Hebrew. And the ending A on Abba is literally a definite article in the Aramaic. It literally says the father. And it's Ab. It's Ab is father. There's many of those associations you can make and begin to understand and to see. And then there are words of 2 syllables there that we'll learn to read and look at and to pronounce. So we'll come back to that later today. I want to go through some of these to give you a little bit of advance help as you start to try to pronounce these when you're doing your homework at home. Yes?
I got a question about, with the little t is called comet?
Yes, the little t is called a comet.
When it's a short vowel, it's the A, but then they use the word sod under the long vowel. I didn't understand how they...
Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll go through this all in very much detail for you, okay? We haven't gone over it yet, so I'll answer that. Okay? All right, any other questions with regard to the exercise and what I'm expecting for Thursday? Notice a lot of that exercise is not written. A lot of that exercise is pronunciation and practicing. And we'll go over it in class, both before and after, to make certain you get pronunciation down well and understand it. So that's all that's due on Thursday is the workbook exercise there, exercise number 2, lesson number 2. All right? Keep your reading on schedule, because for today already you should have read chapter 2, and so some of this should not be totally new, and yet we're going to treat it as though it is new. Just to remind you again of the writing of the letters of the alphabet, to make certain that you're understanding how to do them. All right, I'm going to begin with the aleph. Remember the aleph, you just take a kind of a curvy line to represent it, and then without tying these together in the middle so it doesn't look like an X or like the Greek key, leave some spaces there, and that's the simplified form of aleph in handwriting, to maintain the same square script, a stylized form of it in your writing. The beth remember, the important thing about the Beith is the little ledge here at the bottom right-hand corner. Very important that you retain that. And then, so I don't go over the center thing here, let me pull this down this way. The gimel, remember, has the angled leg, the support at the bottom, and is only the right-hand side. The daleth, remember, is going to need a ledge at the upper right, and so leave that ledge up there so that it works well as you go through the box. The hay, remember, as you come across and down, when you come back to do this final stroke, leave a gap. Don't make it too close. Don't try to make it close. Give enough room in here that it's clearly seen that it is the hay and can't be confused for the chayth. So leave a gap in there for the hay. The wow, remember, it's just curved at the top and comes down the side. Whereas the Zion, that is very similar, has the little thing at the top, almost like a hook, goes across. It's a little roof on it there. And then the chayth, make certain you connect it. And there doesn't have to be a ledge up here. Just make certain you've got the three sides of the box for the chayth. All right? The taith is one of them that's perhaps the most different. And that is, you can begin it about the middle and come up and curve and come back and across the bottom and then go up to the upper left. Notice that the bottom does not take up the entire bottom space of the box. Notice that the sides are angled. But the important thing is that you get that little curve in here, that you have that little tail on it on the upper right-hand side to distinguish it. The kaf, three sides. It's like the chayth tipped over to the right. It covers three sides. You don't have to worry about any tittles because it can be rounded on both to distinguish it from the beith. All right? The lamed, begin above, curve over to the upper right, and then come back to the center of the box at the bottom. So it's kind of curved there. The lamed. The maim, I begin it on the bottom and curve it up and around and down to the bottom left-hand corner, and then put in the little mark up there that it's tittle that helps distinguish it. Okay, the maim. Then remember, the noon is on the right-hand side and a flat base. The samic begins at the upper left and just curves around the whole box. Leave a little tittle up there. Just curve it around the whole thing. It's almost like a circle. Remember, ayin means what? Means eye. So you're drawing a circle representing an eyeball, basically. So you have samic, and then the ayin begin at the upper left, and then as you come in, this will come from the corner all the way this way down. That's ayin. The pei, begin with the tittle that helps distinguish it from the kaf. You can put this way if you wish. It can be just the inside, or it can be both the inside and outside. It doesn't matter. It's your choice. You can choose your style. It's like your own handwriting. You choose sometimes to write certain letters different ways than what someone else may write them, but they're recognizable as having many of the same characteristics, and that's a choice you have there. The pei, the tzadi is the one most difficult to learn, and you begin at the upper left corner and come down and curve around like that first of all. Okay? Come down and hook it around and then go up. That's the tzadi. That's the tzadi. I'm going to write the ayin again here right next to it to show the difference. The ayin starts in the same place, comes down, but this is curved around this way and this comes all the way in. So you have a different form for the ayin than you do the tzadi. This V shape is there, but this one is higher, this is curved out away from it, and this is a continuous curve to the bottom and left. In fact, to make that a little bit easier, you can do it this way. Bring that down. You can bring down all the way. Just be careful that you don't bring this back up, because then it gets close to what the sheen is. So you have the pei, the tzadi, the kof. Remember, it goes below the line, has a gap between its top and what is the rest of it, and bring that gap in this way, the kof. The resh, just like the daleth, but without the ledge, on the upper right hand corner. On the sheen and seen, you can begin by just making a U and then cross into the lower left hand corner, and if it's a seen, you put the dot over the left hand horn. If it is the sheen, you put the dot over the right hand horn. Okay? And then the final letter, you can begin it just like you did the chayth, but when you come to the bottom of the left hand side, make certain that you put a foot on it. And make certain that foot is visible, that it clearly breaks. Otherwise, it'll look like a chayth. And this is tau. All right? The tau. Any questions on the writing, Scott?
Well, it just seems like a lot of the corners are rounded as opposed to square as you make those. Is that appropriate?
That's appropriate, yes. Absolutely. In other words, you don't want to have a very clearly stiff, engineered type of look, right? With those sharp corners. That's not necessary at all. You could, as one style, have it that way, and some of you may prefer to have it look more that way. That's fine, but it's not necessary. You can round off some of those corners where you don't have to have the distinctive point to it, the tittle. Jeremiah?
Which word did you say means I?
Ayin. Ayin means I.
Not the sonic.
Not the sonic, no. Ayin. Okay? Yes?
On the hate and the
And that's right, though. I did draw the picture of the sonic and say ayin and I. And the reason I did that is the Paleo-Hebrew is a circle for the ayin. And getting confused there. I'm glad you brought that up. All right? The ayin is I. Okay? And the reason it's called I is that in the Paleo-Hebrew, it looked more like the sonic. It was just a circle. Okay? Thank you. And we will, mention more of the Paleo-Hebrew as you go along through Hebrew, but we don't want to get you all confused now, which I almost did, except for Jeremiah. All right? And some of the rest of you probably thought it but didn't want to say it, right? Feel free to say it. Okay? Scott, do you have a question?
Well, just making sure I understand. I thought the main distinguishing factor between the hate and the tall was a little ledge on the top. Is that part of it?
No. Because it can be either one. That ledge on the top can be there or it can be absent in both chayth and tau. The distinction is the bottom left-hand corner foot for the tau. That's the real distinction. Okay?
And then one other question, since it's up there on the coat.
Yes.
And it doesn't touch at the top. Can you come all the way through on the bottom, or does that gap on the finish?
You mean come in here?
Right.
It's best to keep a gap, but it's not. I'm not going to be fussy about it. As long as it's distinguishable, I'm not going to make it. There should be a gap at the top, definitely. Should technically be a gap at the bottom, but I'm not going to complain if it isn't. Okay? That's a difference that is perfectly feasible and is satisfactory. Okay? Don't try to become overly detailed about the way you form the letters. Make certain that you are sufficiently detailed that you can distinguish the letters. So like what Scott's talking about here, if you bring this in to where it touches the base, that's not a big problem. Why? Because you still have the below the line part and you have the gap at the top. It doesn't make any difference. And remember, this is just a convenience. This is an accommodation to handwriting, a simplified form that we're doing here. We're not trying to imitate the exact printed form. All right? That would be for calligraphy. If you were in the Jewish synagogue schools and you were studying Hebrew, they'd probably hand you a calligraphy pen and teach you how to form the beautiful calligraphy of the Hebrew alphabet as part of your lessons. We don't do that here because it really is not necessary for us to take up that much time, although I would encourage you, if you have an interest in it, to take that up yourself later as just a kind of a little hobby, especially if you're interested in calligraphy, and doing designs, and who knows what you can come up with. I've done some designs using, the way you see the Arabic calligraphy, making pictures and things out of words and letters, and you can do the same thing with Hebrew, and end up with some beautiful examples. Okay, any other questions about the writing of the consonants? We were talking about these special letters last time. I want to go over these again, and we'll be going over them again and again and again in the days ahead in the future. The gutturals are these letters: Aleph, Hey, Cheth, Ayin, and Resh. These 5 we call gutturals. And notice that the gutturals is spelled G-U-T-T-U. There's not an E in it. It's not in the gutter. G-U-T-T-E-R. It's G-U-T-T-U-R-A-L. Surprisingly, I even see some Hebrew grammars misspell it. And these are guttural sounds. They're sounds that have to do with the air passing through the throat and various glottal stops that are involved. So you have Aleph is a silent, and it's called a guttural because there is no sound anywhere. The lips, the teeth, the palate are not involved in the pronunciation of Aleph. It is totally silent. It's like a puff of air belonging with the vowel sound. That's it. The Hey, you have that breath coming out of your mouth as you pronounce it. Hey. Cheth, you have the throat constricting. You have that glottal stop. And you have that guttural sound that comes through. That's where these words get the name gutturals. Cheth. You have ayin. Ayin, again, is often silent, but as mentioned before, sometimes it has almost a G sound, like in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's like your glottal, again, the glottal stop, but it's not as harsh as the cheth. It doesn't have the breath coming through it in an aspiration. It's just a constricting of the throat that's barely audible. And then the resh. The resh, you could actually argue has some of the lips involved and other things, but it is classified as a guttural. But in your textbook and in other places, it is sometimes a guttural. And I'll explain that when we come back to them again and go over them. This is a little bit early to cover these 5 letters, but I don't think it's because I'm saying early because we haven't really covered it deeply within the textbook yet, but we'll be coming back to it. But we're learning the consonants, and I want you to know these classifications because they're very significant and important. These 5 letters, believe it or not, will be your nemesis or your joy for the rest of Hebrew, because these 5 letters behave in a special fashion. They refuse to be doubled. They prefer A-class vowels, and they prefer a compound schwa. These are their preferences. The reason resh is sometimes a guttural is because resh can be found in rare situations with a doubling dogish. But these letters take these 3 rules. And you'll hear them again and again and again as we go through the course. Because this is part of what you need to know if you're to understand why things happen to Hebrew words the way they do. Jeremiah?
If you said that the Aleph and the Ayin are gutturals because they have a slight breathing preparation, and isn't the compound schwa redundant?
In some places it is, but we'll come back to that when we deal with it. Okay? All right? Prefer compound schwa. Prefer compound schwa. Right. Silent letters. Silent letters, Aleph can be silent. Hey can be silent, wow can be silent, and yod can be silent. And we'll observe those and watch for them. These are the 4 letters that can be silent. They can be silent in various positions. The hey is normally silent at the end of a word, not within a word. The wow can be silent in a number of situations, and so can the yod. The aleph is technically always silent. Always silent. Its sound is only the vowel that is under it. The vowel that is under it. And when we come back to that and talk about the compound schwas, you'll see more of the answer for Jeremiah's question too. Yes?
Why isn't ayin included with the silent letters?
It's not included with the silent letters because whenever it occurs in an initial place, it is often or is sometimes a G sound, so it's only sometimes silent. And often when it occurs at the end of a word, it will prefer what we call a furtive pathic under it. And so there are situations which ayin is only sometimes silent. Okay? And so it's left out of a lot of lists of silent letters. Okay? Vowel letters, the hey, the wow, and the yod are vowel letters. The labials, using the lips pronounce, baith, mame, and pay. Baith, mame, and pay. Now these all are needed for you to understand then how sounds are formed and how we pronounce various syllables and various words. We'll come back to more of these as we go through. The Bagad Kafaf letters can be soft or hard. They can take the Dagesh Lene, that's what that Dagesh is called in the Bagad Kafaf letters, to harden it. Dagesh Lene is a hardening Dagesh. Dagesh Forte is what we call the doubling Dagesh. So this word will be pronounced Shim Meir. Listen very carefully. Shim Meir. Notice the meme is pronounced twice. It's pronounced at the close of the first syllable, Shim. It's pronounced at the beginning of the next syllable, Meir. How do I know that's a doubling Dagesh? First of all, that meme is not included among the Bagad Kafaf letters. All right? If it was a Bagad Kafaf letter, it'd be more complicated in determining what it is. But whenever you see the Dagesh inside a letter that is not a Bagad Kafaf letter, you know automatically it's going to be the doubling Dagesh. Okay? Now let's talk about the vowels. Hebrew was originally written without any technical vowels or vowel pointings. There were vowel letters utilized at various stages of Hebrew, but it's primarily just writing the consonants. What you see there on the left is the Tel Dan stela that was found at Tel Dan in the 1990s. That has reference to the nation of Israel on it. In fact, that reference to Israel is located right here, where it has here Melech Israel, and then below it, it has Beit David, the house of David. One of the few references to David specifically. In fact, at the time it was found, there were many in Israel who believed that David was a mythical king like King Arthur, who never existed. It was a figment of men's imagination, and therefore the biblical account was merely legend and myth concerning David. But now with this, that debate has been restarted again against those who have denied the historicity of David. And it's interesting, but since the Tel Dan stela was discovered, we've also found out that there are a number of other finds in which David was also mentioned that were just kept out of the press or out of the scholarly publications because the scholars who had that material in their hands and authority over it did not want the rest of the world to know they had any reference to David. But it so happened that this one was in the right hands that it got put out there immediately and exposed. And then later we find out this isn't the first piece of evidence we've had archaeologically, which leads us to remember very well that it is not archaeology that determines whether or not we trust what Scripture says. First of all, we can't always trust the archaeologists because they will sometimes hide evidence that does not fit their preconceived notions of Scripture. But if you're to write, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, if you used English letters and you followed the Hebrew methodology, that's what it would look like. No vowels. Now notice that I have word breaks because in the text there are word breaks here in the Tel Dan Stela and in many other Hebrew inscriptions and writings. So we add those vowels in, we can understand it. Now note that when you and I have English as our native language, our birth tongue, we don't have any difficulty in recognizing what that says, do we? Immediately upon looking at it, we can figure out that it's Genesis 1:1. Why? Because we're so familiar with the language that all we need is the consonants. And that's the way Hebrew is done as well. And always was. And still is in the Jerusalem Post. It is the consonants that are published, not the vowels. Only an occasional vowel in the Jerusalem Post is published when it makes a very distinct difference in the meaning of the word and might be an unusual word or word form or a new word that people would need to know how to pronounce or to distinguish from something that might be similar. So that's the way that it was written. We're used to seeing this, and as we go through the Hebrew, we'll learn the rest of them. Next week, you have a vocabulary quiz that is assigned on Tuesday. The vocabulary for that quiz is the vocabulary at the end of chapter 2 that you have in front of you there. Let's read it through together so you can hear the sounds, all right? And I want you to repeat after me, okay? Kadosh. Kadosh. That means holy. It's an adjective. Tsevaot. Tsevaot. That's a noun meaning armies. The old translation is hosts. Av. Av. Father. Adam. Adam. That is the word for man. It can also be the proper name Adam. Edamah. Edamah. That's a feminine noun meaning ground or earth. Not earth as a globe, but earth as soil. Ground or earth or soil. Adonai. Adonai. Adonai is Lord or Master. It can be with or without caps because it can be used of an individual person, of a human being, as well as of the Lord God. Now normally, when it's pronounced this way and pointed with the commas at the end, Adonai, that is primarily a title of deity, and for man it's usually shortened to Adon. But there are places where you have Adonai or Adoni used of man as well. But just remember it's Lord or Master. Ach. That's the word brother. Let's say that again. Ach. Brother. Echad. That's one. It's a number one. Achat. That's also the number one, the feminine form, where echad is the masculine form. Achar. That means after or behind. It's a preposition. Akal. That's a verb meaning he ate. Amer. That's a verb meaning he said. Ish. That's a word meaning man or husband. The plural is enashim. It has other meanings as well, but man or husband is your first meanings. Eretz. When you hear Eretz Yisrael, that's the land of Israel. Eretz means land. It can also mean earth with regard to the planet Earth, meaning all the world. Isha. That's the feminine form of ish, and it actually means woman or wife, and the plural is nashim. Enosh. Enosh is another word for man. Bain. It's a word meaning between. It's a preposition. Haya. That means he was, or in some context can mean he became. Halak. That means he went or he walked. All right, we'll leave this up here. I'll come back to it again at the end of class to read through it one more time. All right? Yes?
Can you just pronounce father again? Is it av or av?
Av. It's halfway between a V and a B. Halfway. Okay, it's aspirated. All right, let's go to the vowels, and let's go through these vowels.
Barrick, can I ask another question, please?
Yes, go ahead.
How do you know, it seemed like in most of the vocabulary that we just recited, the accent was on the last syllable, but on a couple it was on the
That's
first.
the normal rule in Hebrew. Accents are on the last syllable unless otherwise indicated in Hebrew.
So what is the indication, the little sideways triangle?
The little sideways triangle is the indication utilized in the vocabulary lists. It is not always used in Hebrew, in the Hebrew text. There'll be other accents, though, that will be used in place of it. That is kind of a catch-all accent, because there's so many different accent forms that can be used. All right, let's learn the vowels. The first one is the vowel pathach. Everyone? Pathach. It looks like a dash underneath the letters, and it has a sound of a short A, as in the English word bat. Okay, so pathach. If you pronounce the name correctly, you'll pronounce the vowel correctly. Okay, in modern Hebrew, the pathach is not distinguished from the comments. In modern Hebrew, all of the A-class vowels are ah. Okay? But we'll learn to distinguish the pathach from the comments as in classical biblical Hebrew, because that's what we're learning to read. All right? That's the first letter. It's an A-class letter, or A-class vowel. All right? The next is comments. Everyone? Comments. Comments is that little T underneath a letter, and it is a long A, that is the A as in the English word father. It's ah. Comments. If you pronounce it correctly, if you pronounce the name correctly, you have the sound. All right? Comments. Ah. Pathach. Ah. Comments. Ah. These are A-class vowels. The A-class vowel is further lengthened if it has a concluding hey, which is a vowel letter, which in ancient Hebrew is sometimes used to represent the ah sound. And so when you have ah this way, it's the same as the ah in father, but it is sometimes drawn out a little bit longer, so that the difference would be bat, father, father. Get the difference? A little bit longer on it. And it's at the end of a word, and so it's drawn out. And the hey then is silent, totally silent. All it does is lengthen. And so in transliteration, we indicate that by means of the little circumflex over the top of the A that shows it as the extra long comments. Then we enter the E-class vowels. The three little dots below the letter are the segol. Everyone? Segol. Notice the se, the as in bet, the English word bet. Segol. Segol. Okay? Then we have the long E sound. It's the E as in beret. It's actually a French word we borrowed in English, beret, the little hat on top of the head. He wears a beret. Well, that ET at the end, the T is silent, and that E is pronounced in long A. It's like the A like in the Spanish, señor. The A sound. That's the two dots. So the three dots are the two dots are A. The two dots can be followed by a yod, which makes an extra long A sound. That is still an E-class vowel, and it's called a tsere yod. The vowel name is tsere yod. Let's go back again. The two dots, I didn't give you the name of that. It's tsere. Tsere. Okay, tsere. Again, if you can say it, you've got the sound. Tsere. Okay, and this is tsere yod. Tsere yod. All right. The next vowel is a single dot. It's called hirek. And it's an E sound, the I as in machine, but also it is sometimes shortened to the I as in bit or the I as in pin. When you have the hirek yod, it is the long sound always, as in machine, E. It's an I-class vowel. The first of the U-class vowels is 3 dots at an angle, not 3 dots clustered, as in segol, but the 3 dots down in it. We call this kibbutz. Kibbutz. And that sound is not a full oo sound. And it's a short U. The long U is the shurek. Everyone? Shurek. The shurek is oo, as in butte. Ooh. All right? The U-class sound. And then you have the dot over the letter is the holum. Everyone? Holum. Holum is an O sound. And the longer holum is a holum wow. A holum wow. And in this situation, the wow is not a consonant. It becomes a silent vowel letter. And it's the O as in vote. Notice there's no real distinction between these two. The reason they're distinguished in transliteration is so that you know what is represented in the Hebrew. So if you see the circumflex over an O, you know it's a holum vowel as opposed to just a simple holum. We have an unusual vowel that occurs in Hebrew that the Masoretes decided to use the form of the comets for, but it's not really an A-class vowel, it is an O-class vowel, and it is called comets hatuf. Everyone? Comets hatuf. And when you look at this, you'll find out that the sound, you'd expect comets hatof, but they say comets hatuf. That's because in some words it's more of an O sound, in some words it's more of a U sound, but they're all short. It's like the O in God. It's like the U in cut. And so you end up with O, U, O, U. They're very close together in sound, and you have to learn the words to know which ones there are. This one is okla, okla. Everyone? Okla. The comets hatuf is always in a syllable that is closed, a closed syllable. The comets by itself prefers to be in an open syllable, a syllable that has a vowel. The comets itself is the end of the syllable. But if you close that syllable off with a consonant, as here, ok, that cough there has a silent schwa under it. It's a syllable divider. And it concludes that syllable with a consonant sound. That's what we call a closed syllable. So the comets hatuf is found, it's a short form of the vowel, found in a closed, unaccented syllable. Ok-la. The accent goes on the last syllable unless otherwise specified. So this is a closed, unaccented syllable. Yes, Kelly.
Just to understand the closed and the open syllable, would the last syllable, the la, be considered an open syllable?
Absolutely, yes.
The vowel?
Correct. Absolutely. You're correct in that. Okay?
And so every time it's a closed vowel, it's going to be the O sound rather than the ah?
When you have the symbol comets, that little T, and it's in a closed syllable, it will be O or U. And you have to learn the distinction in vocabulary form. All right? Closed and unaccented syllable. Closed and unaccented syllable. Now we go to the short vowel forms. The 2 dots in a row underneath, you can lift that to a superscript E as transliteration for it. Sometimes you'll see an inverted E used as a transliteration for it. And in some places you'll see an E with a brev over it. There's, as we mentioned before, there's not a standard form of transliteration for Hebrew because of the nation Israel's refusal to establish a standard. And so we all just go along and each one doing their own thing, or we try to have something that is pretty well popular. Our Hebrew department sat down and determined how we would do these and what we would accept as common standard of transliteration. So we're all in agreement on these. But it's like the E, the first E in beret. Beret, beret. You almost don't even hear it. It's almost like bray, beret. In fact, in modern Hebrew, that schwa at the beginning of a word, like in the name Solomon, it's supposed to be vocalized in biblical Hebrew, shlomo, shlomo. But in modern Hebrew, it's just shlomo. They don't give that vocal sound at all. All right? Same with the Hebrew word for covenant, brit. Brit in modern Hebrew is just Brit. Sounds like you're talking about an Englishman, a Brit, okay? Except they even go further. The tau is no longer pronounced as a T, it's an S. So they say bris in modern Hebrew. Modern Hebrew is not classical Hebrew. Please keep that in mind as we go along. That's the reason we emphasize using the classical pronunciations rather than the modern. Then we have what is called the Hatif Pathic. And by the way, that little dot at the end there, that's called a schwa. Schwa. The schwa, the two dots there underneath, that's schwa. Schwa. And then we have a Hatif Pathic. Hatif Pathic. It's a pathic with the schwa. This is what we call a compound schwa. And these are always vocal. They're always vocal schwas. They have a sound. And this is just like the A in kaboom. You can't tell the difference between that and beret. Beret, kaboom. You can't tell the difference in the sound. But it's an A-class vowel because of the pathic. And the reason that's significant and important in Hebrew is that can determine for you exactly what the meaning of that word is, to recognize that it's a pathic instead of something else. A Hatif Pathic. If you combine it with a sigol, it's a Hatef sigol. Hatef sigol. Usually represented by a little I, sometimes by a little E in the superscript. Like the I in dividend. Dividend. The second I. You have the comets. You have the Hatif comets. Hatif comets can be represented by a superscript O, as in confirm. Hatif Pathic, Hatif Segol, Hatif Comets are the names of these half vowels. They are half vowels, not full vowels. Half vowels. That's significant because half vowels can never form a syllable by themselves. Now, that doesn't make any sense to us in English. Because if we say kaboom, it doesn't matter that the A is a half vowel. In English, we say ka is one syllable, boom is another one. But in Hebrew, that's not the way it works. The syllabification, the dividing of syllables in Hebrew is totally different. You say, well, why is it important? Why is it significant? If you have two sounds, why can't you have two syllables? Because the rules of vowel pointing and the way words are formed have to do with the Hebrew definition of syllable, not the English definition of syllable. So if you try to apply English definitions for syllable to the Hebrew, you're going to get confused. Because then the rules just don't seem to apply. There seem to be hundreds of exceptions. So you have to get into the mind frame of understanding that half vowels never form syllables on their own. Half vowels never form syllables on their own. Question?
Could you re-go over the pronunciation of these three again?
They all sound the same. As the schwa. Beret, schwa, kaboom. The Hatif Pathic, dividend, Hatif Segol, confirm, ka. Same sound, whether you say ba, whether you say ka, v, or ka, it's all the same. There's no distinguishing the sound. All right? The reason they're distinguished in transliteration and in classification has to do with the Hebrew specifying what class of vowel it is by means of the pathic, the segol, and the comments, which is only significant not for pronunciation, but significant for understanding where the word came from, what its original form was, and how it then is changed in various stages. Okay, but there's no distinguishing of sound. All right? Good question. Any other questions on those? Yes, Jeremiah?
Transliterations are the smaller letters that we're seeing on the...
Yes,
Okay.
they're the smaller letters, correct. The superscript type letters. The letters that are elevated are the short vowel letters for transliteration. Okay? Now, let's go back through these one more time. All right? Let's start with the first one. It is what? Patak. Patak. Don't switch into modern Hebrew pronunciation of patak. Okay? Patak is what you'll hear on the internet. Patak is what you'll hear some who use modern Hebrew pronunciation for teaching biblical Hebrew. But that causes confusion. If you keep the classical pronunciation, you will understand the classical. If you keep classical pronunciation of the name, you'll not understand the classical pronunciation of that vowel. So this is patak, okay? Patak. What's the next vowel? Comments. All right, comments. The next one is comments hey. The fourth one is segol. Segol. The last one is tseve. Tseve. All right? This one is tseveyod. Tseveyod. This one is hirek. Hirek. Okay? Hirek. This is hirek yod. This one is kibbutz. Kibbutz. All right? And this one, shurek. Shurek. This one is holem. Holem. And this one is holem wow. Holem wow. This is what? Kametz chatof. Kametz chatof. All right? It's a closed, unaccented syllable that's in. The two dots below is schwa. Schwa. All right? This one is hatif patak. Hatif segol. But notice that the segol precedes the schwa. When we say hatif, that's pronouncing the schwa. Pathic is the pathic. In Hebrew, we go from right to left. That's why you have the name going right to left. Hatif pathic. Hatif stands for the schwa. Hatif, the schwa, plus patak. Hatif patak. Hatif segol. Hatif comments are these vocal half vowels, which cannot form syllables of their own. All right? Now, I'm not going to talk about vocal schwas right now because I want to do one more thing, a couple more things here before we go any further. Come back to that. I want to go back here now to your vocabulary for the vocabulary quiz on next Tuesday. I want to go over this with you again. I want you to pronounce this again and look carefully at these words and observe. The first one is kadosh. Accent on last syllable, because in Hebrew, the accent is on the last syllable unless otherwise indicated. All right? Kadosh. Everyone? Kadosh. Notice you have a kametz under the kof, and you have a holem wow, giving us the O sound. Kadosh. The next one, notice it begins with a schwa. When a schwa begins a word, it is always vocal. So it's tz, tzvaot. Tzvaot. Okay, tzvaot. Again, you have to pronounce it to where you come to the end with the accent on the end. Tzvaot. Again, tzvaot. All right. The third word is av. Okay. Adam. Notice we have a hatif pathic, so it's just an sound. Edama. 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 Okay, the word for brother is ach. All right, and next, the word for one in the masculine is echad. Notice you have a segol, echad. Notice the only sound of the aleph is the sound of the vowel, echad. The next one, notice it has an accent over the top of the aleph to tell you that the accent is on now the first syllable rather than the last. It'll be marked for you. So it becomes acher. Okay, acher. Or excuse me, achat. My eye skipped down the next one. Achat is the feminine for one. Okay, acher is the next one, is after or behind. Notice the a used. All right, akal. Notice the comets under the aleph, kal, the kaf with the pathak, and lamed. Akal, he ate. Amer, he said. Ish. Notice the yod is silent. It's not a Y sound. It's the hirik yod, and so it is pronounced ish. Notice eretz has a accent over the first syllable. So we emphasize that first syllable. Eretz. Okay, and then we have isha. Notice the dot in the bosom of the sheen. The sheen is not a begad kafaf letter, so that is not a hardening dogish. It has to be a doubling dogish. So the ish, shah, the sheen has to be pronounced twice. To close the first syllable, ish, and to begin the next one, isha. All right? Enosh. Notice the hatif segol under the aleph, very brief sound, and the holam wow, o sound. Here we have the tsere yod, bain. Haya. Halak. Notice the schwa, the two dots in the bosom of the kaf sofit. When the schwa occurs at the end of a word this way, it is always silent. It is always silent when the schwa occurs at the end of a word. All right. Now, let's go back here to cover the pronunciation for your exercise for Thursday. This is in the workbook. It's in the second exercise. On the second page of the exercise. And we want to pronounce these. Remember that when you have a hirek yod, it is E. When you have a comets, it's A. When you have a tsere, it's A. When you have a tsere yod, it's A. When you have a shurek, it's U. When you have a holam, it's O. When you have a holam wow, it's O. So we'll pronounce the words as we go along here, these syllables, okay? I'll pronounce them, you repeat. Starting on the right-hand side, D. Ga. Me. Be. Da. Ke. Pu. Ko. Ra. Wa. Zu. Te. You. Let's go to the second line. He. Lo. Na. Te. Now notice there's not a dot in the tau, so don't pronounce with a hard T. Soften a little bit. They. All right? Not they, but somewhere between they and te. All right? They. All right? It's a little bit of catchy. It's hard to do. Now the next one is a begad kafaf letter without a dogish, so it is fo. Remember, pay becomes fey when it doesn't have the dogish, so it's fo. Tsi. Sa. Ri. Va. Ke. Tu. Go. Da. Let's go to the second short vowels. Pe. Ha. Bi. Di. Tu. Now make it real short. Tu. It's like kibbutz, not blue, okay? not shurek. So keep it short. Tu. Se. Pa. Te. Ki. Tsu. Wa. Za. Te. Sa. Ka. La. Ni. Mu. Du. Ta. Ra. Ve. Ge. Cha. E. Wi. E. Hu. Let's back up there. I pronounced it too long myself there. Hu. All right. Ni. Or excuse me, ni. All right, let's go to the long and short vowels mixed in the third part of the exercise, okay? Me. Va. De. Ke. Pe. Ko. Ra. We. Zu. Tu. Ga. Te. De. Bo. She. Sa. Si. Tu. Ge. Re. Do. Yo. Excuse me. Let's back up there. We got two problems there. The do is another soft T, not though and not toe, but in between. Do. Okay, do. And then you, not yo. I mispronounced that. Okay, it's you. P. They. Ge. Chai. Now that threw one in on you. All right? When you have a patak followed by a yod, it becomes like AI. I. Okay? I. So it's a totally different sound. The third from the last there, nay, to, yea. And let's do the words of one syllable. Door, taf, av, mole, poor, hole, gan, chish, pim, nade, yesh, aid, im, sus, gil, tov, kol, or, shear, roots. Okay, let's take the words with two syllables. Remember to accent the last syllable unless otherwise indicated. Davar. And this baith is doubled. We'll have to explain that later. It's dib bear. Okay, diber. Koteo. Shemesh. Sefer. Boker. Erev. Na'ar. Akal. Shomer. Kisei. Baruch. Halutz. And actually that should be chalutz. Chalutz. Okay? Wered. Zera. Beni. Kara. Wihi. Ezer. Yicher. Baal. Yayin. Eli. Evan. Amer. Okay. Now you've gone through it. Keep practicing this at home. Remember, if you use some of the internet pronunciations, that they'll use modern pronunciations for a lot. Maintain the distinctions where you need to make them distinctions. Allow them to help you where those distinctions don't make a difference. But keep at it. Keep working at it. We'll work at it more in class. Now next week, or next class time, and Thursday, we're going to talk about syllables and what we mean by syllabification, because one of your exercises coming up here is going to be dividing syllables. It occurs on exercise number 4, but we're getting into this. We're going through all of the vowels, all the letters, trying to put these together, and then we're going to talk more about syllabification and give you all the rules for that and the exercise. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, before you leave, one more thing. Several of you have asked about vocabulary helps. The best vocabulary help is Larry A. Mitchell, A Student's Vocabulary for Biblical Hebrew and Aramaic. That's the very best. That is a great help. If you want something other than Hebrew Tutor, which is available online, and by the way, I gave you if you go to my website, you'll find that there is a link there for Hebrew Tutor online instead of spending $40 on the software. It's available online now. But if you want something hardback, goes through and gives you the vocabulary, beginning with the most frequent and going down through the less frequent, Mitchell's vocabulary is the best. If you find John Watts's word lists out there somewhere cheaply, it's a good one, does the same thing. And then the most recent one and the most expensive, $20 for this, is George Landis's Hebrew vocabulary, but he has a lot of other things in there besides vocabulary. But Mitchell, Larry Mitchell, will be the best one for those of you who want more vocabulary.